Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Last week's decision by the Securities and Exchange Commission to move against the CEO of Oando Oil and Gas, Wale Tinubu, and his deputy, Omamofe Boyo, seems to be playing into the hands of other interests with substantial holding in the group, according to published news reports. For more on this developing story, we're now being joined by Johnson Chukwu, the Chief Executive Officer of Cowry Assets Management Limited. Johnson Chukwu, welcome to the program.
Welcome to the program,
Good
sir.
to see you again.
My pleasure.
Now, what exactly is the situation with Oando PLC and the sanctions that have been meted out by the Securities and Exchange Commission? The company has been accused of all kinds of things, ranging from insider dealings, failure of corporate governance, non-disclosure, irregular payments to members of the board, and then all of that. What's the significance of this step that has been taken by Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC?
I think
Banning the two CEOs, the CEO and his deputy, from sitting on the board of any company, for public company, for 5 years, and then the board, the SEC has also appointed an interim management. It has ordered that there should be a shareholders meeting by July 1. New directors should be appointed. Can you help us, shed some light on the implications and the significance of the action?
Okay, let me start from the implications. The first thing is that it indicates that the Securities and Exchange Commission has the capacity to bite and not just back. It's an elevation in terms of regulatory oversight function of Securities and Exchange Commission. We've had, of course, Oando is one of the behemoths we have in this country, local behemoths. And for anybody to go against the management of Oando, given their tentacles, including strong political leverage, for me, it shows a lot of courage, shows that the regulators are alive to their duties. If issues are brought to their knowledge and they carry out their investigations and they find anybody or any institution culpable, that they have the power to intervene. Because the greatest concern you will have if you have a regulator who does not have power to intervene in a regulatory issue. But the other things we have to look at is that Oando has responded to the allegations against them. And for me, what is of critical importance is that Oando is saying that they were not given fair hearing, that the report was not discussed with them. That, for me, that would be very strange, because if you engage Deloitte and Touch, one of the reputable big five audit firms, to carry out a forensic audit, it would be very strange if Deloitte and Touch did not engage the management in the cost of their investigation. But that's not yet in the public space for us to know whether they were exposed to the outcome of the investigation before it was published.
Actually, I read a report this morning indicating that SEC communicated their findings to Wale Tinubu on July 10, 2017. As a position of SEC on that matter.
That's why I said I was quite surprised that a firm like Deloitte and Touch will carry out a forensic audit and not discuss with the management. And but you have brought this to. It's good you have brought this to light. So if it was communicated to them, they had a long opportunity to respond to those allegations. If they didn't fail to respond, it could assume that the allegations or the findings were truthful. And it would have formed the basis for any regulator alive to his duties to respond, to react. So for me, the key message is that we have a regulator who is alive to his responsibilities, who does not care whose ox is God, who, like they say, justice is blind, who is blind to your position, both political and economic, and who is pushing that the right thing should be done. In other countries, it's not a very strange thing for you to see a regulator suspending anybody from holding. In the past, we've seen that even in this country, where the Securities and Exchange Commission has suspended certain people from holding positions in publicly quoted companies for a number of years. I think there was even an instance where somebody was suspended for life from holding the position. I wouldn't want to mention the person's name because it's not what we're discussing now. For holding the position in the publicly quoted company for life. So they wouldn't be the first time this is happening. So for me, what should be of paramount importance, how do we address the failings in corporate governance that led to those weaknesses as it relates to misstatement of financial reports or statements, and market abuse, payments to directors and management that are not approved or defined in the company's policy. You want to have a very robust business environment. One of the requirements is that you also have a very strong regulatory environment. Because without regulation, the tendency for people to go overboard and do things that will not further the interest of the general public is quite high.
Interesting, sir. Now, of course, we've got a couple of weeks between now and the 1st of July, which is the deadline that the company has to have its meeting with regards to the appointments of the new directors of the company. What can we expect during this period leading up to the 1st of July?
Good thing that SEC has appointed Mutiu Sumuni to head the interim management team of Oando. The first thing he has to do is to get the company secretary to call for an extraordinary general meeting as specified by Security and Exchange Commission. Between now and July 1st, you have enough notice time to advertise an extraordinary general meeting, and the shareholders will come to that meeting and elect new directors. Then the new directors will now be saddled with the first responsibility of looking and recruiting new management. I think that's the chain of events that should take place. But the market will respond violently to this intervention. I believe the market will respond today. I also expect the South African Stock Exchange, Johannesburg Stock Exchange, to suspend or take also directive actions on the trading of the shares of Oando immediately, pending the outcome of these processes going on.
Well, who bears the brunt of all of this? The shareholders. And then there is a line in the statement by the Securities and Exchange Commission that it may consider the option of, maybe prosecuting. They didn't use the word prosecuting, persons involved. But if you look at the list of the infractions, like insider abuse, insider dealings, insider training, market abuse, they were practically accusing certain persons, of corruption. And there was a line that this may be referred to the appropriate, agencies of state. Are we likely to see some of the directors involved in all of this being prosecuted? And will you recommend that?
What I believe that SEC did is to also indicate that they have the stick, and if need be, that they weigh the stick beyond what they've already done. And that, for me, is a clear threat. Or would you call it a threat? It's to indicate to the people involved that should they decide to fight, because of course the management of Oando has already come out to say, look, SEC should withdraw the report and the sanctions within 3 days, and they could have a recourse
to go to court.
To court. So what I think SEC is also saying, that in case you decide to take that route and not respect the authority of the highest regulator of the security and of the capital market, then we also have other tools with which we can beat it to line. And that's why they made that veiled threat that we might decide to prosecute. And if you look at the front page of your sister newspaper today, you saw the acting director of the Security and Exchange Commission with the acting chairman of the EFCC.
Yes.
I think that was also a statement. He said, look, we are of the same mind with the prosecuting arm of the government. And if need be, we will activate that process. So you better respect the decisions that SEC has taken. For me, that's a veiled threat that if need be, they will call in.
But if you look at the list of sanctions, it look like very high figures. Do you think that SEC is high-handed? The directors have been asked to refund as much as 145.7 million, and then there are other penalties, 30 million, here and there, that was why I asked you, who is going to bear the brunt of this? Won't shareholders be affected one way or the other?
Okay, if you look at the refunds, apart from the tax refund, which even if you look at the tax fund, among the allegations is that they deducted the tax, withholding tax on dividend of about 20, instead of 10%, about 24%. So that should be refunded to the shareholders, because it simply means the shareholders were overtaxed. And if that money was not remitted to Federal Inland Revenue Service, which is not very likely, then the money, in fact, actually, most of the monies could be remitted to the State Inland Revenue Service, because if they relate to individual shareholders, then they will go to State Internal Revenue Service. If they relate to corporate shareholders, they go to Federal Inland Revenue Service. But in any case, if the deductions were made and not remitted, it should be refunded to the shareholders. If they are remitted, then it will have to come from the purse of the company to refund. So the company will be at the brunt. But the other refunds that we have specified as it relates to overpayment to the directors, SEC also said that some of the directors have already issued checks to refund the payments. So they will come from the pockets of the shareholders, of the directors involved. And if you look at the breakdown, some of them were to refund 20 million, some 10 million, and some
30 million.
30 million. But that is if actually they were overpaid, then it came into their personal purses, and they have to make the refunds. But when you made reference to who will be at the brunt of these issues, the larger brunt will be borne by the shareholders. I expect the market to respond negatively to these issues. So you expect a negative movement or southward movement in share prices. So for those who are holding the shares of Wando as part of their wealth, as part of their portfolio will suffer some level of diminution in value. So if they are in a position they need to raise money from selling their shares or to use those shares to pledge as collateral, we're also going to see a situation where companies that would ordinarily take the shares of Wando as collateral will refuse to take them as collateral, because there is also a question mark on the going concern status of the company. So once you begin to query the going concern status of the company, nobody wants to hold the shares either as part of your portfolio or even as security for lending purposes. So the shareholders will be the ultimate losers in this quagmire.
Interesting. Now, aside from, we spoke about the forensic audit, of course, that we also know that SEC has asked Deloitte to actually conduct on this particular matter. But aside from that, in Owando's letter of response to SEC, how did you feel towards their response? I know we spoke about the forensic audit and how you're not too sure about them saying they didn't really know about it. But how did you feel about their entire response?
Well, if what Ruben said is factual, which I believe it should be, that the findings were sent to them and were sent to the MD of the company. So then it puts, it completely erodes whatever is contained in their response, because the response we are basically denials of when we were not aware of this. The areas they denied were the issue of tax deduction. They said they never did any excessive tax deduction. The issue of misstatement of financial statement. They said there was no misstatement. The issue of sale of Owando exploration and production, that was reversed. They said at the point they recognized that into their P&L and declared dividend on the strength of that they did not believe it would have failed. But SEC believed it was a fictitious transaction, basically designed to give an illusion of profitability so that they could come to the market and raise new capital. The question you have to ask yourself is that who was Greenpark that the company wanted to sell its exploration and production arm? If the company that they wanted to sell it to had no reputation or no financial status as to have succeeded in a merchant acquisition, then it can be fairly imputed that it was a fictitious transaction.
And they obviously described SEC as a calculated prejudice.
Well, we'll take a short break now. President Donald Trump has touched down in London at the beginning of his official visit as a guest of Queen Elizabeth II. Let us link up with incoming visuals of that arrival and stay with that for a few minutes. Well, that's, President Donald Trump of the United States arriving there at Stansted Airport aboard Air Force One. And now that's his helicopter about to leave Stansted Airport. Later today, he will meet with members of the royal family. He will also meet with Prime Minister Theresa May to discuss climate change and to also discuss Chinese technology company Huawei. Leila, you will recall that the United States had advised the British not to engage Huawei, and there was a lot of controversy over that, even leading to the exit, of the former Defense Secretary.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It is quite worrisome, of course. It is a very controversial topic, but we're hopeful and we can't wait to see what comes out of this visit. Like you said earlier this morning when we started the show, a great interest as well as the people of Great Britain and their response to Donald Trump. But I guess we'll see that over the next few days.
Well, of course, it will be well received by the government and also by the royal family. But as I said earlier, our concern is about how the people of England themselves receive President Trump. The mayor, Khan, of London, had said that, England should not roll out red carpet.
And described him as a global threat.
So I was trying to see if there was any red carpet rolled out there for him. But let's see. We expect that there will be protests by ordinary people in Belfast, in London, and in other parts of the United Kingdom. But I don't think that that will bother him. And look at the First Lady of the United States, always looking so elegant,
She does grace herself well. We'll wait and see what the outcomes of this trip definitely
Well, I mean, before we went on break, Johnson Chukwu, we were discussing Wando and the sanctions against that company by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Now, the issue of fair hearing is something we brought up, and I said earlier on that, look, you said you have doubts, that it would be almost unthinkable for Wando not to have been asked to, look at the findings of the forensic audit that was carried out. Now, all of this started through petitions that were submitted to SEC, right? And those petitions were put in by Dahiru Mangal and Ansbury, a company called Ansbury Incorporated. Now, isn't there a mechanism in place in SEC itself, without those petitions, for SEC to be able to do its proper oversight without waiting for petitions coming from outsiders? And I raised the point of fair hearing again because, somebody just sent me a text message, saying that, look, it was actually the petitions that were communicated, to Wando in July 2017. And not necessarily the findings. But as you said, perhaps that would be most unusual for them not to be given an opportunity to defend themselves. But, for our own education, is there a mechanism in place, for SEC to be able to do proper oversight, regulatory oversight? Because Wando may not be the only company, that has issues of insider dealings, market abuse. And if there is a mechanism in place, how strong is that mechanism?
Okay, there are a couple of things that are in place for regulators to monitor the performance or the activities of quoted companies. One of which is that at annual general meetings of quoted companies, representatives of the Securities and Exchange Commission is required to attend the meetings of all the annual general meetings and extraordinary general meetings of quoted companies. Similarly, representatives from the Nigeria Stock Exchange are required to attend all annual general meetings and extraordinary general meetings of quoted companies, and to observe deliberations at such meetings. So they come in as observers. Secondly, there are regulatory requirements that stipulate regularity of submission of returns to Nigeria Stock Exchange by quoted companies, and timelines for submission of such returns, including quarterly returns and annual returns. These are what you call mechanisms through which the regulators can monitor the performance of quoted companies. It is now required of quoted companies to all migrate to international financial reporting standards. That shows a lot of transparency in terms of reporting, information reported. And also has a high level of prudence in terms of provisioning or recognition of income or losses. These are among the several mechanisms. They are what you call post-listing requirements as stipulated by Securities Exchange Commission and the Nigerian Stock Exchange for quoted companies. Compliance with those post-listing requirements, including one of the areas they are holding Oando for, which is on the aspect of insider trading, that the company sold more than 1 billion shares prior to announcement of a market-sensitive information. Now, what we have gotten to is a stage where there are systems put in place by the Nigerian Stock Exchange that will pick such insider trade and possibly flag it. In terms of oversight, these are some of the mechanisms that the Stock Exchange and the Securities Exchange Commission used to monitor the performance of these companies. But beyond that, there are also provisions for minority shareholders to raise up issues of corporate governance. There are provisions that you call under the rights of minority shareholders to bring up issues and draw the attention of the regulators to such issues. But there's no provision for a regulator to sit in the office of a quoted company to monitor their day-to-day activities. So you have indirect mechanisms for monitoring the activities of quoted companies. One, they must comply with all post-listing requirements. They must comply with corporate governance standards. Some of the regulators, like PENCOM, actually even assess, appraise the performance of directors of such companies. The regulators are also required to see proof of the independence of the internal control system or internal auditors, which will require that the internal auditor has a dotted reporting line to the board. And we want to be sure that the audit committee of the board is independent and sit regularly and get input and report from the internal auditors. And such reports are not in any way constrained by management. So when they see signs of such constraint or influence of the internal audit personnel in the discharge of his or her duties, it becomes a yellow flag. Let me put a yellow flag that could indicate that something is wrong. Again, for some of us in the market, we also monitor the timeliness of companies when they're meeting their quarterly returns. When you are having delays in meeting your quarterly returns, or we know that one, maybe you're having difficulties agreeing with the external auditors, and that could be an indication of corporate governance challenges. So there are several mechanisms, in summary, through which the regulator, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Securities Exchange Commission, monitor the activities of publicly quoted companies.
And these mechanisms, do you believe that these mechanisms are working? I mean, we've seen a clear example now with Oando, but do you believe that in the long term, these are mechanisms that really and truly can work to ensure that these problems don't continue to arise and these problems are spotted out whenever we do see them?
You cannot completely eliminate infractions in any system. What you can do is to set deterrents and build mechanisms that will reduce the occurrence of such infractions. And when the infractions occur, you should be very swift in imposing sanctions where it becomes necessary. The sanctions will act as deterrent to those who will want to willingly breach rules and regulations governing the efficient operation of the market. But you cannot legislate against human action as it relates to people who decide to obey the law or breach the law. What should matter is that where there's a breach of the law, sanctions are imposed.
If you were to advise the CEO, deputy CEO, and the directors of Oando PLC, what will you be saying to them, given the kind of challenge that they are facing at this moment? I'm sure they could do with some advice from industry experts.
Well, I don't know whether they're looking for advice. They've responded to if you read through their response, I don't think that response indicates that they're looking for advice.
What options are available to them?
Well, they have already marshaled the option. They say they can go to court. But the other option to have to them is also to the line of peace and say, look, we'll step aside for 5 years, and then we will look at our system again. And if there are failings in this system, we will make them good. We will repair them. And then for the posterity of prosperity of the company and the shareholders of the company, including the employees. For me, it's not... we've had instances where a regulator like Central Bank came up with a regulation and specified that anybody who has occupied the chief executive position for 10 years must retire and be out of the board for 10 years. It affected people like Tinubu then, Jim Ovia. There was initial protest. But I believe with benefit on hindsight, they will realize that, look, it was good for them because their institution has now gone through series of change of leadership and has made their management to be more robust than it would have been if they alone had continued to run those institutions by now. Because it also is time for diminishing return. I mean, if you look at the current management of Orlando, they've been in that saddle since, I think, 2001 or 2002, when they acquired Unit Petrol and converted Ocean and Oil into Orlando, O&O. So if you have been on a post from 2002 or thereabout to 2018 and 19, that's 17 good years. It's long enough for you to have put in your best to position that institution. It's also long enough for you to take, even if it's a temporary break. That would be my approach to it.
We once had a guest on this program who said, look, the biggest challenge for corporate Nigeria is regulatory risk. Does that apply in this particular case?
When you talk of regulatory risk, it's very broad. You talk of all the regulators, start from the tax authority, and the tax authority, when you talk about tax authority, you're talking of state tax authority and federal tax authorities. You're talking of NSC, if it's a quoted company, the stock exchange. You talk of PENCOM, if it's a pension fund. You talk of NICOM, National Insurance Commission. It's too broad. But I think the person must be referring to is situation where policies at the governmental level are not consistent.
So we do, however, have some breaking news that the police have sealed up Owando's headquarters right now. This news is just coming to us. How do we take that?
I said earlier in this conversation that the DG of SEC has also made allusion to the fact that they could actually use other law enforcement to compare compliance to the directives.
But what does that mean? What does it mean? The police have come in just now and sealed up the headquarters. What does this mean not only for Owando, what does it mean for the stock exchange too? Well,
the good thing is that it's still breaking news. If you want to ask, if you ask my thoughts, which are basically speculative, I think what they want to do is to enforce the removal of the MD and the
CEO and the deputy CEO.
The deputy CEO. If you ask my thoughts, because we are in the studio here, I don't know what's going on there, but my thought would be that they want to enforce the compliance of the company to those, particularly the directive of removal of the CEO and the deputy CEO, and allow Shomonu to resume the role of an interim management team leader or acting MD of the company. That's what I want to believe. It's not necessarily to stop them from their normal business activities, because there's nothing in the directive that said the company should stop its normal operation.
Well, we'll keep an eye on developments with Owando PLC and the matter with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Well, we want to thank you very much, Johnson Chukwu, for coming to the morning show.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much indeed. It's time now for a short break. When we return, public affairs analyst and politician Fafa Dan Princewell will be here to discuss the state of the nation. Stay with us.